Thank you. Appreciate that.
No, I did the wrong thing. Yep, down again.
Okay, Brian, I think we're ready whenever you are.
Okay. I call this Planning Commission, the Woodland Planning.
There we go.
I call this City of Woodland Planning Commission public meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Please take time to be sure your phones are off and join me for the Pledge of the Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops, to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. In some cases, we act as a quasi-judicial board for land use cases which can be then appealed to either the council, the hearings examiner, or court. Can the clerk please take roll call?
Commissioner Watson, Mattson,
Here.
Cliff Georgioff,
Here.
Sharon Watt,
Present.
David Simpson,
Here.
Whitney Robb.
Okay, at this time, I ask that any member of the public who wishes to give testimony for items not on the agenda, please approach the microphone at this time. Anything at all. Please state your name also when you come up to the microphone, just for the record.
Sure. Name is Max Bonder, resident of Woodland, Washington. And I brought a testimony today in support of House Bill 1337. I brought a copy for all of you as well. Should I hand out a copy to everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and read it. So my name is Max Blonder. I'm a resident of Woodland. I'm here tonight to respectfully urge the Planning Commission to implement House Bill 1337 fully and faithfully as written, without adding local restrictions that go beyond the state residential code. Why HB 1337 matters. The legislature passed House Bill 1337 in response to Washington's housing affordability crisis. Too much of our residential land is limited to single-family homes that are increasingly out of reach. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, provide a practical, low-cost solution that allows families and communities to adapt to changing needs. The legislation made important findings when passing the bill, including affordability. ADUs are smaller and less expensive, often rented below market rate, making them a meaningful tool to expand affordable housing. Family and seniors, ADUs allow multi-generational living, provide options for seniors to age in place, and create housing for family members or others who may need support. Flexibility for homeowners. Homeowners benefit from added income, increased security, and ability to adapt their property to meet family or financial needs. The key provisions of the House bill, The law is clear and specific in its requirements. 2 ADUs are allowed. Cities must permit up to 2 ADUs per lot, detached, attached, or converted from existing structures. Equal treatment, local rules for setbacks, door placements, yard coverage, and designs cannot be more restrictive than those applied to a standard single-family house. Reduced fees, system development charges, and impact fees for ADUs are capped at 50% of those charged for the primary residence. And then no owner occupancy requirements. Property owners do not need to live on site in order to build or rent out the ADU. And then the implementation timeline, as fully planning GMA City, Woodland must update the comprehensive plan by June 30th. I know we're a little bit behind on that, but under House Bill 1337, the city is then required to bring its ADU regulations into compliance within 6 months, so by December 31st. At that point, if Woodland does not act, state law will promptly conflict local rules. So on a personal note, why I'm here today is I plan to use the extra land that I have to build additional units so my parents can live nearby. And in the future, these units could also provide additional rental income while helping meet our community housing needs. This is exactly what the House Bill 1337 was designed to support: practical family-based housing solutions that address affordability while giving homeowners flexibility. So in conclusion, I respectfully ask that the Planning Commission to implement House Bill 1337 as codified under RCW, what it says right there, fully and as written, without adding unnecessary local barriers. Doing so will give families like mine the flexibility to care for loved ones. Will expand housing options in Woodland and will help us meet the urgent needs for affordability and housing supply. So thank you.
Thank you, Max. Does anyone have any comments about or questions for Max? Well,
Just thank you for coming in and, yeah.
So I was going to ask Travis, I know that the wording that I've gone through for that House bill in my day job, it has prohibitions that GMA counties can't do this and can't do that. So I thought that this was just automatic, that you don't have a choice of adopting it. This is state law now. Is that kind of how you see it, Travis? Or, I'm just curious, because Woodland's a smaller jurisdiction. I don't know if that gives you flexibility or not.
So there are caveats in there for smaller communities and different timelines. And the one thing I wanted to point out, and that is there is actually an exception or one thing on his notes that is not correct, because he was looking at the original 1337. There has been a change to other RCWs, and that is that we do not need to update our comprehensive plan until December of 2025, and technically 1337 gives us 6 months from the adoption of the comprehensive plan. So if we adopt it and it goes into effect December 1st, we would have until May 5th of 2026 to put that into effect. So it's 6 months. From the original language, it says June, which is when our deadline was, but since we got a 6-month extension, that also applies to 1337. So it is something that we will have to implement. And one of the documents that I gave you today was the SCJ memo. And this technical memo essentially reviews the City of Woodland standards and what needs to be adopted. And on page 3, you will see 1337 is in there, and it is something that will have to be adopted as after we adopt our comprehensive plan. So this is the housing regulation memos that was produced by the consultant.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I believe our code already allows ADUs on lots that are 8,500 square feet or more, with some, they do have some requirements for owner on site and things, but we have
It does.
we have some in place.
Yep.
But it doesn't meet all of the state's requirements by far. So anybody pressing the issue on the state thing.
Yes. And in
should get their way.
2023, we did go through the process of looking at one of these other house bills, and I want to say it is 1110, and we drafted a significant number of code changes, and it included removing some of the hurdles to ADUs that went to city council. It had a first reading, but they did not do a second reading or final reading, so it didn't go into effect. So there are a bunch of housing changes that would accommodate a lot of these changes. It just hasn't been adopted. And it's on the list of stuff that will be addressed after the comprehensive plan is done. So that one, we already have language drafted, but it does need to include the language for the 2 units. It's only 1 unit.
Does our current proposal, I didn't read it that long ago, I'm sure that's in the housing goals and policies, this would be, right, the ADU?
Well, it would be consistent with the,
growth?
it would be consistent with the goals and policies that are in this comprehensive plan.
Okay,
It's to change our code
right, okay.
to match the policies.
Right.
And if I name them off, you'll probably remember some of them. It was the ADUs, it was the duplexes on corner lots where there's a driveway on either corner. And then there was, slips my mind right now, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, certain lots. And there were a couple other that when you see them, they'll come back to mind.
Right, okay, Clark County did
Yeah.
a similar thing.
But you and Sharon were the only 2 planning commission members who were around at that time. And
I remember that.
From what I was reading on the proposed comprehensive plan changes, we have to adopt at least 3 of the criteria with that, but you can't go less than the 3.
yes.
So,
And
is there a list of all the different things? Because I have an issue with, we have limited parking, and we are not a big city that has public transportation.
So there's actually there's new RCWs that are being considered by the state that will put in maximum parking numbers, not minimum parking numbers. So theoretically, even if there's no transit available, we will not be able to require as much parking as currently is required.
Which, again, they look at things for a big city,
Yes.
and
But to answer your question, yes, I want to say there was like 12 things on the list, and I think we had narrowed it down to 6 options that looked good and were consistent with City of Woodland. And that's part of the reason why it didn't get to the second reading is we had new council members come on board and they said, I wasn't part of this process, I'm not going to vote for it. And so they kind of
because.
chickened out for the second reading. Even
Because
though,
I can see developers going around some of the issues that they have with trying to get as many buildings on lots as they want. And instead, since if we don't make it that you have to be an owner occupied, then you have developers going, oh, I'm gonna build this and put 2 ADUs on there.
so that is actually one of the requirements that we can no longer enforce because there are Supreme Court decisions that basically say you can't use land use law to define families. And so we can no longer limit how many people live in a structure, and we can no longer define whether it's occupied owner or family. And so that actually was one of the things that we needed to fix in the ADU, because we can no longer do that.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to know, I mean, if the person owns the property, then they own the property. And
We
then-
just can't establish whether they're a resident there or not.
Right.
It's the same problem we have with bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs, because our code doesn't include Airbnbs, but bed and breakfasts are a conditional use permit. But anybody can apply for a bed and breakfast, and if they rent it as an Airbnb, we can't prove whether they live there and provide breakfast in the morning. Yeah. So that's part of the stuff that we need to bring up to date and fix.
So, but that would be coming down the pipeline and would have to be looked at again once that does or does not pass. And in the
Going-
meantime, we need to establish the criteria of the 12, if we want to adopt all 12 or limit it down or.
Yep. So we can go through and do that all again. Yeah. and I can sit and spend time with you and talk to you about how we got where we are. And I can even show you the videos so you can watch the presentations and discussions from that time.
Sure.
So, yeah, we have all that.
Okay, I think if nobody has anything else, we'll move on. Max, your testimony is duly noted. It looks like that's coming to fruition eventually. That's my understanding. Yes, come on up.
So I attended those council meetings when that was being discussed, and the public comment was not in favor of the ADUs because of small town parking issues, and realized, you know, for what our community is and the culture of our community, it wasn't something they wanted to bring in. They didn't see it as a positive. Anyway, so that's why it just got dropped.
Name,
Yeah.
please, again, just for the record.
Donna Butler.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah.
And I think that what I heard Travis say, and this is my understanding, is that the state won't allow us to prohibit it. That's
Right.
the gist of the bill. So whether
Yeah,
or
so
not
we'll-
people want ADUs, we may have to allow them anyways.
Right.
That's what I'm getting to.
Right, and I did hear that too, and I don't know, because I know there are some things that they've promoted for affordable housing and stuff, and it was contingent on or only applied to the size of the city. There were population
Right. Okay,
things
yeah,
that
I'm not-
determined whether you had to implement it or not,
I'm
and
not
so,
as familiar with that
yeah,
section. because
that's,
I didn't
yeah,
get it.
and they may have wiped that out, because they're really pushing, yeah,
Thank you.
uh-huh.
All right. I think that's it, unless there's somebody else that wants to talk about anything not on the agenda. Okay. We'll go ahead and move on. Do we have a motion for the items on the consent agenda? Has everybody looked at the agenda? Yet? Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
Okay. Can the clerk please take a roll call? We have a motion.
Do we have to take a roll call or just
It says to, but
like all in?
do you want a roll call for it? I mean, your script says to.
Just say it.
Tel just normally asked if there was anybody in opposition to the agenda as
Okay,
written.
that's
Everybody-
probably a better shortcut.
Everybody in
than to listen
favor
to me.
say aye. too.
Yeah, okay. Hearing no opposition, motion carries. Okay. Do I have a copy? I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me. Do I need to read anything, or can I hand this off to you, Travis?
Can you see this far?
Yeah. Okay. So, we're going on the action items here, right?
Oh,
We
we're
just
going
did
to, we have to approve the minutes of our May 15th meeting.
Oh, gotcha, sorry. Do we have any motions to approve the minutes from our previous
I
meeting?
move to approve the minutes of the May 15th meeting.
Second.
All right. Does anyone have any opposition to approving the minutes of the previous meeting?
I'm gonna abstain because I couldn't get to the minutes to read them, so, and I wasn't here.
I don't. I'm okay with the minutes, so. We have 3-4, so even if Cliff and Whitney abstain. Okay, Dave, thank you for sharing your laptop with me, I appreciate it. Travis, am I supposed to read just the item 250087, the supporting packet for the
Yep.
Planning Commission rules, appointment of chair and co-chair? If I'm skipping or not doing things in order, please rein me in, because this is new.
So technically, to introduce it, you just need to read the full title of the item on the agenda. And so I did have that up on the screen, so if you have
Okay.
trouble reading that, I
No,
can.
I can put on my glasses.
Okay. So that would be
What am I supposed to be reading here? I thought I just, the
Planning Commission rules, appointment of co-chair, of chair and co-chair.
Okay, the subject is, which I thought I just said, but the subject is the Planning Commission rules, appointment of chair and co-chair.
So is this a motion to adopt these rules?
So.
I think we have to nominate a chair and a co-chair, is basically.
Yep. So that's the first thing you want to do, and then I'll do a quick presentation for what's attached to the agenda. And I updated it with a new date. And so at the next meeting, I think we should probably go over the rules and then decide whether you want to propose any changes to those rules. And then if you can agree upon that, you get a majority. Then I would route it to you for individual signatures so that you could all have the new rule agreement to operate under.
Okay, so you're talking about the new rules for nominating a chair and a co-chair. Okay.
Yep. That's after that.
All right. Which I don't have.
This one, yes, you do.
Do I?
You should.
Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay.
So I'm assuming you're just going to want to find out who wants to nominate who for chair and co-chair.
Okay, let's open that up to discussion. Does anybody want to be the chair?
No.
I could do the chair.
If you don't want to, I'll do it. I'm
Okay.
just doing it for the good of the order.
I nominate Dave for this, for chair.
Excellent work, Sharon. I second that nomination.
All right.
Do we have a nomination for co-chair?
I nominate Brian for co-chair.
Second.
Okay, Whitney, do you have any desires to do either of those, or, no?
I'm not gonna come in fresh and.
Okay,
go
but
for
you can,
something.
you
I
can.
would not like to do that.
It's still a voting body, you know? How about you, Cliff?
I don't care. I'm so brand new. I'm trying to get
Okay,
my feet wet.
okay.
I'll do whatever you guys need.
All right.
It always does seem like
Okay, do
there's.
we need to vote on that?
So you
typically
technically have
like
two
years worth
motions
of
on.
work in motion.
Yep.
And when you jump into that wheel, it takes a few meetings to
Yeah.
pick it up, and that's fine, you know, that's
Right,
fine.
okay.
Oh,
Can we have a vote on the nomination for Dave Simpson as chair?
So for that, you don't want to do the roll.
Cliff Georgioff,
Yay, yes.
Brian Matson,
Yay.
Sharon Watt,
Aye.
Whitney Robb,
Yay.
Dave Simpson.
sure, yes.
The ayes have it.
And-
Okay,
And for co-chair?
do we have a vote for co-chair?
Cliff Georgioff.
For Brian Matson as co-chair.
Okay. Cliff Georgioff,
Yes.
David Simpson,
Yes.
Sharon Watt,
Yes.
Whitney Robb,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes. You were previously chair, weren't you?
Yes, I was chair for over 10 years, yeah.
Well, then you have slightly more experience than I do. Do you want to switch right
Prepared
now?
to switch?
All
Okay.
right. I'll take my computer back.
All righty.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
More notes too, I think we have. And you're back.
Boy, he's quick to move me out, see that?
I'm quick to move you in. As I stumble
Okay.
through the beginning, maybe this will go a little smoother.
All right, so here we are. Thank you, everybody. If we could go off agenda for just a minute and have a little round table, let everybody introduce themselves, and that way we'll go through everybody so you kind of know our history and we know your history and everything. So we'll start to my right. Just
What do you wanna know?
tell us about yourself and why you're here and what you think you bring, you know, what you feel you bring to the table.
My name is Whitney Rabb. I was born and raised here. I've lived in a few different places. I was on the fire department for 23 years as a volunteer and in charge of the EMS program for part of that time. I'm hoping to have some input in decisions on. My goal was, I see a lot of the developments that are coming in, all of them want variances. Whether they're major or minor or both or whatever. And I don't feel like the developers ever really look at what's best for the citizens in the community. And so that's why I finally pulled the trigger and put in an application, because I feel like unless it's a benefit to our community, the variances should be few and far between.
Well, you're in the right place. And you bring a good resume with you. That's
I've
fantastic.
lived in Wyoming, I've lived in London, I've lived in some big and small places, so, yeah.
Fantastic. Sharon, you don't get the pass.
Okay. Sharon Watt. I'm a retired high school teacher. I'm not from here. I've lived here quite a while. I've lived through a flood, so there's that. And this is like my second time on the Planning Commission. I was off for a while, so I just liked to bring every person sort of perspective to this, you know? No particular expertise one way or another, just hopefully, like I say, every person sort of expertise, not expertise, but perspective.
And she does a lot of big, great work for the library, and I don't know what else, but probably other things.
Yeah.
She's awesome at proofreading.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a volunteer. I'm with the Friends of the Woodland Library, and I basically run the book sales and deal with all the donated books, which are flooding us right now, but okay. And the new library is great, and if you haven't been there, you should go.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm David Simpson, and I was previously on the Planning Commission from around '02 or early '03 to 2017. Of that, I was chair probably 13 of the years. Proudly able to say that because of my service on the Planning Commission, I've been twice chosen as Woodlands Volunteer of the Year. So we have had some busy, contentious years with contentious testimony, and sitting here and standing up for what is best for Woodland is a big part of that. I'm also fortunate enough to have done I wouldn't call myself a developer, but I have grown my business on my property, and I've had to deal with all of the, for lack of a better term, red tape that goes with building and all of the challenges. So I do see a perspective there on those difficulties, but I'm proud to say my kids went through Woodland schools all the way, and my grandkids are going through Woodland schools all the way, and I hope the next generation is here. And I just want to keep Woodland growing positively for them.
I didn't grow up in Woodland like several of the other people in this room. Been here for, I'm going to say 13 years. I've been on the Planning Commission at least, I'm going to say 9. Is that right?
Is that right?
I don't know.
No.
Something like that.
6.
Less 6? Okay, 6. There was a couple of years it seemed like more than 1 year. It was really rough at first. I know I got baptized by fire a bit. But my day job, I'm a land use planner for Clark County, and so I deal with a lot of land use issues on a bigger scale. But essentially, every project's a project wherever it's at. You know, so I am familiar with regulations and adhering to certain standards, and I am sympathetic to when Whitney says that developers do want variances. I understand granting a variance when it's a site-specific issue that can't be met because for some reason, but for the most part, I kind of align a little more with you, Whitney, in that I don't think what's the point of standards if we're gonna vary them all the time? And also, I'm really a big believer in developers paying for the impact of their development, whether it's, improved street frontages and such. I think that's essential for any smart planning from a small city, because we don't have the budgets to do all of that without the developers building out what they're impacting. So. That's it.
All right, Cliff? My name's Cliff Georgioff. I'm a Portland kid, born and raised. Moved up here about 6 years ago to get away from the people. And I really like the quietness. But prior to that, I lived in La Center for 10 years up there. But I'm still a Portland kid because I drive down there almost every day to meet my buddies. I'm on the Planning Commission because on my walks I met a neighbor who I became pretty good friends with, and after a while he suggested that I take a shot at this after telling him some of my experiences. I've owned numerous residential properties, commercial properties in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, California. It sounds better than it is, but I've had experience with these guys a lot, bumped heads a number of times. My avocation for 40-some years was I was a referee for football, high school and college. So if we have some arguments, just look over here and we'll settle them. That's about all I can tell you. That's about all I can tell you. I'm retired also. I've been retired for a while.
Fantastic. All right, thank you all very much. So, moving right along, we're at item 5, discussion workshop on our comp plan. And so we'll start with the staff report.
You made it look a lot easier than I did, so good for, we think we made the right choice, Dave. I wasn't prepared for the behind-the-scenes biography that you were going to make us all do.
Good. Nobody else was either, so it was fair.
Okay. So, I have been putting on the agenda for multiple months now, and sending out emails and giving people announcements whenever I can, that the comprehensive plan draft is on the city's website, and it's been morphing as more and more information gets updated and changes are requested, and I put it up there. So the version that's on the website now and that is attached to the agenda today is essentially the final draft of the comprehensive plan that needs to be discussed, and at the next planning commission meeting is the public hearing for that to have discussion about any additional changes. From the very beginning, the conversation started, well, it started as early as 2023. We were having meetings and open houses, but the active discussions under the comprehensive plan project and grant started in 2024. And given that conversation, I had recommended that people pay attention to the policies and goals, because that is essentially the framework of the comprehensive plan that was in place. And the question was, if that reflected the community in 2015, are there significant changes that need to be made to the direction and the feelings of the community at that time? And I did get some feedback, but the majority of the changes to the comprehensive plan policies and goals came from the fact that there have been significant number of changes to state laws, and we needed to add some additional sections and goals and policies that reflected the change in law for us to be in compliance with the Growth Management Act. But essentially the desires that I got feedback on hadn't significantly changed. The pride in the small town atmosphere and the number of people living in the town, the feedback was pretty consistent that they enjoy Woodland's small feel. But unfortunately, the purpose of the growth plan is to look 20 years into the future, and what do you want the community to look like in the 20 years? So the fundamental changes that were in place, or the fundamental policies that were there, haven't significantly changed except for the changes to state law. And I recommend, or I encourage you to take a look at that plan and to go through it and look at the goals and policies and see if you have any thoughts of stuff that still need discussion. But the one issue that has been brought up repeatedly, and Dave, I'm sure you're going to have some questions, so I'm focusing on the issues that you've brought up before, and hopefully give you, and especially for those of you who haven't been here for those conversations, a little background as to what we did and why. And one of the points that Dave pointed out, and that is the comprehensive plan as it's drafted does not seem to be consistent with some of the other plans that we've looked at. And I want to get into that, why that is. So generally, the comprehensive plan brings forward a lot of stuff that is already adopted under stuff that has been adopted previously, whether it's 5 years ago or whether it's just a couple years ago. So the sewer plan looked at a 2.35% growth rate, and I want to point out that that is a population growth rate, but for water and sewer, just because we build more homes doesn't mean that we're using more water or less water, because if we get a Pepsi bottling company, it would be the equivalent of a 10% population growth because they use a ton of water, even though there's nobody who's going to live here because of that no population growth associated with it. So we're continually trying to compare apples to oranges, even though they're all vegetables or fruits. We're trying to compare them. But the sewer plan, 2.35%. In 2035, it looks at a population projection of 9,274, and it has a capital improvement program that is based upon, as the community grows, we will need additional sewer, and with sewer, you might need a new pump station. And then once the pump station gets built or rebuilt, then you have a pipe where it goes from 12 inches to 8 inches and then back to 12 inches. So at some point, that 8-inch connector that might be a block long won't have capacity, even though the downstream pipe and the upstream pipe will. And so once you fix that pipe, then you're going to have more capacity. And then you're going to go down to the treatment plant, and then you're going to need an additional aeration improvement at the treatment plant. And once that's installed, the plant has plenty of capacity, but you're back to a different lift station now needs additional upgrades. So that is kind of laid out in the sewer plan. The water plan looks at a 2.3% growth rate in 2039 because it was adopted 4 years later, and the population it looks for is, can we serve 10,157 people in 2039? And the answer to that is yes, with a capital facilities improvement plan that includes improvements to the well and improvements to, or the new water tower that just came online will decommission the half-acre or the 500,000 gallon that was leaking. And then next we're going to need to do some improvements on the last filter up there, and then once that's done, we'll need to increase capacity at the well because now we've got a ton of storage, and improved capacity at the filtration plant. But the well has a finite amount of pumping capacity, so we're going to need to fix that, and then we need to acquire additional water rights. But essentially the water plan lays out how we're going to do the water improvements between now and 2039. The park plan, which was adopted just last year, it has a 2.3% growth rate, and by 2040, that is 10,621. So theoretically, those 500 additional people will occur in the last year if we're looking at typical growth projections using statistics. That kind of gives you an idea of how we have existing plans that are all consistent with each other. And then I'm going to pull you up short on the leash because the comprehensive plan does not use anything like a 2.3% growth rate, and I will tell you why. It uses a 1.5% growth rate because we only have a finite amount of property within the city and the urban growth boundary. and using statistical analysis based on the average number of housing units that occurs on a lot in Woodland, consistent with our zoning code, we can only get so many units within our existing area. So when I do that math, I can come up with a number of about 600, 650 housing units. And then I work backwards of, okay, 650 housing units. If we have 2.5 people in each housing unit, we're going to get a growth by 2045 of 8,284 people. So what it means is we're planning for a longer water, sewer, and park horizon, but our land supply is keeping our feet off the gas pedal. But as I mentioned, if we have in big industrial and commercial growth, we have additional water and sewer, even though our population isn't going to keep what's the word I'm looking for? Keep up with that growth. So that's part of, I think, what members of the community and members of the Planning Commission are having trouble with that philosophy. Now, on top of that, I've been since 2020, I have been arguing with Commerce about the fact that we are on the Clark County timeline and we are not on the Cowlitz County timeline, because Clark County, much bigger numbers, and it's a much more statistical analysis that tells them, oh, we're going to allot this many growth in population, and we're going to give Camas this much and Washougal this much, and it's more of a cooperative because it's a bigger pie that they're arguing about. And statistically, the city of Woodland ended up as 0.1% of population for Clark County. So they gave us 105 units for the Clark County growth allotment. And because I worked backwards based upon our viable land supply, I know that we can accommodate that 105 units. We just can't accommodate it in Clark County because that's inside Horseshoe Lake, and there's no vacant lots in Horseshoe Lake within the city. They could pull out the mobile home park and replace it with an apartment complex. That would be one way to do it. But the only other option is to expand into the rural Clark County properties, and annexation is voluntary. So if they never apply for annexation, we can't accommodate those 105 units in Clark County. So knowing that Commerce has worked us into this corner, at least they've said we can take those 105 units in Clark County and we can move it to Cowlitz County and consider it in part of the rest of the city. But in the meantime, the big black box that we have no idea what's going to happen, and that is, what is Cowlitz County going to do? Because they're just starting their process, and they are looking at a much smaller pie and much smaller numbers. And what you see at the bottom there is the Cowlitz County numbers. I went to a planning commission meeting last night, and Cowlitz County is dealing with much smaller growth rates. So based upon the Office of Financial Management projections, they are looking between 0.5, 0.75, and 1% growth rate, which has been their historical growth rate. So they look at about 10,000 additional people coming to Cowlitz County, and they are doing their allotment. And initially they looked at us and said, okay, 20% of our 10,000 people are going to go to Woodland, and that means Woodland, you're going to get an extra 2,300 units based upon county statistics. Well, we only have 2,300 housing units total. So their 1% growth rate means Woodland doubles in the next 20 years. And they are going to allot that growth to us, and they're going to have to give us an urban growth boundary. And we really won't have much say in that unless we go up and start attending those meetings and negotiate, okay, where is that urban growth boundary going to go? Is it going to go up Lewis River? And there's a bunch of 5-acre lots between here and there, which means development is going to be totally spotty and patchy. Is it going to be up Insel Road up into the hills, which means same problem? And how are we going to get water and sewer uphill without the developer's involvement? And when you have 10-acre, 5-acre, 20-acre parcels, no developer is going to pay to install water pumps to pump water up the hill to a cistern that's going to have to be built at city expenses. So up, Gun Club Lewis River has its own set of problems which we haven't planned for. Then there's up Green Mountain Road, which seems like a logical direction for us to go because it has major transportation infrastructure, but again, it's the same problem. The new water tower that we have will not push water up Green Mountain Road to Empress Estates, let alone to new development up there in the hill. So if we're going to grow in that direction, it's a major revision to our water and sewer plan and our comprehensive plan. But if Cowlitz County decides that our urban growth boundary is going to be out Dyke Road, total set of pumping and piping problems. And if it's going to be south of Horseshoe Lake, totally different set of calculations in engineering and water and sewer. So that number of 20%, they've since adjusted that down to 15% growth, and the new number looks like it's about 2,000. But when you run the numbers, it means Cowlitz County by 2046, which is considerably farther out, but it's a higher number that the county is planning for woodland than we are currently planning for. But that's because they're looking at this big giant footprint that they are going to hand to us, whether it's, a garbage can lid that's been flipped up and they present this great steak dinner on the garbage can lid. It's your problem to deal with. Yeah, we are not prepared to have that discussion, and I'm not prepared to defend the city's planning process because those are all 4 different problems that I can't adequately prepare for because our water and sewer plans are not prepared for them, and it's kind of an industrial problem fixed into the process because Department of Commerce wants us to go in 2025 and Cowlitz County is going in 2026. So that's kind of why the system is baked into an inadequate discussion or inadequate analysis. When you look at the numbers, systematically there are numbers that I could make them up, but it wouldn't do us any good. And so another handout that I gave you today is kind of looking at each of those numbers. So for the sewer plan, for example, the population at the top there, if you figure out a population of 9,274, if we have 4.5 or 2.5 people per household, it means we're going to need a total of 3,700 housing units. And we currently have 2,330, which means we're going to have to plan for 1,410 housing units. So using the existing capacity, we are short of 146 units. So the other demographic problem that I'm wrestling with, and that is the reality is families and households are no longer on average 2.48. We have a lot more single-family homes, a lot more childless families. And so on average, statistically, I've seen papers that say the average household is shifting to 1.9 people per household. So if you run those numbers with the smaller household size, which may be our future, we are actually short 1,287 units. So on the sewer side, that's what the end goal of that population, that's what it tells me the sewer plan needs to be adjusted for. On the water plan, it's even more drastic. And part of that is because under the water plan, the engineers use numbers that are not necessarily your usage, but capacity. So for example, if you have a single family home, you can use a 1/2 inch water pipe or a 3/4 inch water pipe, and it's pretty predictable what they call an equivalent residential unit of water. So they can pretty much statistically tell you how much water the average house is going to use. But if that house has a sprinkler system, it has to have a 1-inch water line. So even though they may only use, for the next 30 years, they may only use a 1/2 inch water meter's amount of water, that capacity has to be set aside because if there's ever a fire in that house and the sprinkler goes off, the water use capacity of that 1-inch sprinkler is 1 inch. So if we build a ton of houses with sprinklers and the fire code is leading towards more and more structures with sprinklers in it, our water capacity is used up, and we can plan for less and less users because we've got a lot in the bank to make sure that if there's a catastrophic fire like we see in LA, all those water sprinklers have water to put out the fire. So each one of these plans is wrestling with a different demon. But essentially the water plan, theoretically, in the 20-year capacity, there's 502 units capacity and 1,700 unit capacity shortage that we need to address, whether that's additional capacity, storage, whether that's additional pumping, whether that's additional water rights. That's the water plan needs to wrestle with.
And none of those are for the next 20 years. Some of these are 3 or 4 years old. So we're not even really, that's back to the apples to oranges.
Yes.
We're not really looking at the same. When we're looking at 20 years, that's not looking at 20 years.
That's correct. It's 20 years of their planning horizon. And that
Yeah.
dictates their capital facilities investments, which dictates your water rates and your sewer rates. But, yeah.
So did we get in our comp plan? Did we get a summary that puts all that together and
Yes.
projects those
Yes.
out?
And some of them are very laid out, and some of them are very nebulous because, like for the transportation, we actually broke it down to stuff we think we're going to need in the next 5 years, stuff we're going to need in the next 10 years, stuff we're going to definitely need in the 20-year planning horizon.
So, but
depending
these
on where
things,
growth occurs.
these things with people, when we're counting people and we're counting units, have we got those together on a chart?
Yes. So
It's,
theoretically, the answer to that is yes, but again, it depends on where development occurs, because if we get a big development up off of Dyke Access Road, exit 22 is going to fail long before exit 21 fails.
right, but I'm talking about sewer and water.
Yes. Yeah.
Do we have a chart in here that shows sewer to 2040, water to 2040, and growth, land use to 2040, or are we 2039 and 2035 and 2046?
So I haven't checked it since it was last updated, but yes, that should have all been placed in there at this point.
That's in here someplace,
Yep.
okay. I didn't get that far.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at, if we only have a certain number of units available, because we only have a certain amount of land, and we actually have less people per household that are going in, why are we at a further deficit for water and sewer? Because it seems like you're using 0.6 less per household.
So, for multiple reasons, one is it could be more sprinklers, it could be more landscaping, it could be you have half acres or half-inch meter set aside for that home, and if there's a single person living there and they never shower, they're not going to use any water, but that capacity still needs to be set aside for them. And
So you're looking at it because of the fire department is pushing for more of the homes to be sprinklered.
that's part of what we're wrestling with.
Yeah.
And that's only a recent trend, and it's only gotten different for that reason. So, yeah.
Hey, Travis, I noticed, the difference between 2.48 and 1.9. I mean, numerically, it's not very much, but it results in a higher number of unit difference, right? Is there guidance from the state on what you're supposed to plan for people per household? If you segmented people 30 and under, it's probably going to be different than 55 and over, right? I mean, the demographics of how many, fall into how many people per household, I would assume, right?
Yeah. So we do not correct for that in the comprehensive plan. What the housing section does do is it does analysis for the housing bands for affordability. And you can make assumptions that seniors might fall into a certain housing band, but even that's not a safe assumption. But the GMA doesn't account for that. It just accounts for the housing band, and it's getting more and more complicated. And so you could argue that it's built into the model. I don't have a lot of faith that it does.
You just pull from the census. I mean, what do you do? I'm just curious. I don't have any solution for you. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variance.
Yes,
How many
and
people
my
per household.
answer to that was, we could spend the next 5 years arguing about that, and the next comprehensive plan update may or may not be any more accurate for that exact reason. Because by that time, the average household size may be 1.3, in which case we've got a 40-year plan instead of a 20-year plan.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get to some meat and potatoes.
Okay, so the park plan is probably the one that is most tied directly to population, because the park section talks about we want X amount of acres per 1,000 people and how much land and supply that we have. And the one thing that we have going for us is the park plan includes Scott Hill Park, and there's other parks that we're working on that are not in the plan. So if anything, we're going to end up with more parks than we planned for, even though we may not have water and sewer and housing for the population growth. But that's consistent with the numbers that we do know from like Horseshoe Lake use, and that is like 84, 86% of the people using Horseshoe Lake are not even City of Woodland residents. So we need more parks just simply because there's more. So one thing that we are trying to do is we are trying to work on more pedestrian connections, and we're looking for new Lewis River access points that will only be connected by trails. And the idea being, if there's no parking, the people in the community are going to walk there, but they're not going to drive here from Vancouver so that they can park at Walmart and then walk to the Lewis River. It's the people in the neighborhood that are going to be focused on walking to the river and enjoying our community facilities. So
And to
that
have
may not-
parking for the people that drive in.
yeah, and even that may
sometimes,
not be consistent with the intent of GMA, but it's what's best for the community. So we're trying to figure out how to adjust for community points. So the park, and then here is the county population projection at 1.15% is the original number that they looked at, and I think they're going to end up planning for 0.75. So they do know that they're going to have to give us urban growth boundaries, because additional ADUs, additional density will only get us so far. And anybody who's familiar with the redevelopment down on CC Street and Washington Street, the neighbors don't appreciate that. Maybe the ADUs, so that you have small apartments in the backyard, is the answer to the problem, rather than these big McMansions like you get out of Vancouver or Clark County style development on Washington Street and Beechwood. And so one of the fundamental questions is, why is it so difficult for me to give a straight answer to like Dave for what's happening with our housing numbers? And I ran this number, or this is from the original presentation that we had in 2023, where we talked about the Office of Financial Management at the state. It's relatively easy. They want to apply a number, and it's very linear. You can track, and they can give us a production or a number of what's going to happen in the future. But that is what it is based upon their projections. And across the state, they might get it right on every county that's more than 400,000 people, like Clark County, King County, Lewis County. But the numbers break down when you get into small numbers and small communities. And so I bring this up because this is the original Woodland Urban Growth Management Program that was adopted by the county. And these were the different projections that they looked at. So the top 3 bars are the OFM projections that were in place when we first started planning under Cowlitz County. And then these are the numbers that they estimated by 2022 we were going to have 84, 7600, 6900, 6200. So we were at the extreme low end of the projections when that occurred. And the reality is the numbers that we were kind of looking at in 2022 were the 79, 75, 7400 by 2025, 2026. But we're only at 65, 6600. So even our projections that we were looking at adjusting in 2022 still vastly over planning at that 2.3% rate. And why is that? Because we are totally bipolar when it comes to development. We haven't had significant subdivisions since 2012, and even some of those 2012 subdivisions didn't get built until 2016, 2017. And so you see these are number of occupancy permits issued in 2016, 53, 54 in 2017, 2018, 2019. That's when all of the old what do we call it, the Great Recession, the 2008 housing bubble kind of affected us for a significant amount of time, and that's kind of the end of it. And then we had no new housing. 2020, 7 new housing units. 2021, 4 new housing units. 2022, we had 0 certificates of occupancy. So I throw the number out all the time. 24 units in the previous 4 years. Depends on when I took that number, but I was not kidding. People complain about how much growth there is in Woodland and sky is falling. That was not us. There literally was no population growth for years. And then in 2021, we had some subdivisions get approved, and this big bubble again came through. And we're starting to see Holt Homes build up there behind the elementary school. They pulled 33 permits, only 2 of them got occupancy to date. 2024, we issued 44 permits for residential new construction. Only 26 units have got occupancy permits. 2025, 42 housing new construction permits issued to date, and 0 of those have actually reached occupancy. So again, we're going to have this feast or famine cycle, and people are freaking out because, you know, all of this growth, and it's just impossible to do a good job predicting what we're going to look like, because we all know that when those subdivisions are done, those 300, 400 units that are approved, it's going to work its way through the snake, and it's going to be skinny times again. And the reality is with the amount of land that we have left, we're going to see 30 apartments here, 24 apartments there. We're going to see 15 here. We'll see 6 units here, single family residential. But the meat and potatoes of that is gone. And so in the next 5 years, we're going to have this giant ramp up of population, and then it's going to level out, because until we have an annexation, there's not a significant amount of residential development that we are going to experience. And whether it's going to be up Green Mountain Road or Insel Road or Gun Club or up the river or down south of Horseshoe Lake, trying to predict what's going to happen, I could do it, but you're going to think I'm an idiot 10 minutes into the conversation, because it's all based on wishes and my best professional judgment, which is going to be pretty shitty.
So 33, 44, and 42 permits are all those single-family home permits?
Yep.
So since 2022, we've had 120, let me guess, doing quick math, 125-ish single-family permits
Permits issued.
issued.
Yes.
No multifamily permits issued?
So there is a 30 unit project that has their building permits submitted, but they have not completed their engineering to get the public road improvements and the water and the sewer. So I don't know what's taking them so long. There is a project up Green Mountain Road right by your house that was originally approved for 186 units. but they are now looking at redesigning to like a 55 unit subdivision. So that was capacity I had counted in the first draft of the comprehensive plan, and it's still there. But until they do a subdivision or build the apartments, the difference between 55 tiny homes and 186 apartment units, vast difference. And that's why I specifically had the conversation kind of late in 2024 with the council. I said, do you want me to invent stuff and give you multiple scenarios, or do you want me to just take a snapshot of what's in the pipeline? The snake looks like it has 2 lumps going through it. Do you want me to just take a snapshot and tell you what it means? Or do you want me to keep giving you updated snapshots because I can give you a better snapshot? But until this guy decides to build his 86 units, there's also the sand pile, the not apartment site that was approved for 252 apartments, and they're now building a 85 lot subdivision, and so it's a part of that snapshot that's no longer applicable.
So why would we build a comp plan based on a snapshot of 2024 when we're approving this in 2025, basically starting in 26? Shouldn't we have, because that snapshot, which I sent an email last week asking for what projects are in this total, because the total is just shy of 700 units. We don't have 700 units in the pipeline. We have 125 actual permits in the pipeline. So we're counting on all of these things when we actually know at this point, before our comp plan is finished, that they're not going to happen.
Yeah.
So are we going to update that number?
So our pipeline actually has about more than 700 units in the pipeline. But the 122 is only the stuff that's in construction. There's probably another 200 that are approved subdivisions where they're building the roads and installing the water and sewer. So that gets us to about 350 is the ballpark of the stuff that I'm confident will get building permits within the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Then there's the 186 that may occur. There's a mixed-use commercial development where the developer basically said, you're a jerk and I'm never going to talk to you again. He's got 500 units on the possible scale, but since he won't talk to me because I'm such an asshole, chances are that's 0. And so I don't include it in the 700.
You weren't, I mean, that was so outside of the code, that project should have been shooed away, and they kept coming. But I think counting them as somebody's going to live in these in the next is not right. When we're looking at planning and counting and inventorying our land, that's our job here.
Yep.
We shouldn't count things that we know aren't going to come to fruition.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's been the point I've been trying to get to all along, is let's clean this pipeline stuff up. And because it gives a really false sense of, we need 700 units for the next 20 years and we've got 700 units coming online. Well, we don't. And we shouldn't say that. We should plan accordingly for the fact that we might have 350 units coming online.
Yeah.
But it really takes the stress off that last little 50 acres, and we're looking at code changes to accommodate. That's what one of the things our goals and policies are telling us to do.
Yep.
So is it possible to get that number changed?
Yes. So you and I can sit down and
we are sitting down.
yeah. So, but the problem is I don't have the data for the land use approvals that are coming through. So I crunched the building permit data, and I can tell you the number of approved lots and the number of building permits that have come in for those lots. But the stuff that got approval, but they're not doing the engineering necessary for it to occur on the ground, that's all guesswork. And that's part of the reason why I went to the council and said, do you want me to go through that guesswork? And their instruction was no. Take a snapshot and do the analysis based as best as you could.
Well, and you have developers who are constantly changing, like for the Sandlot, for example. They've changed their plans at least 3 times on what they want to do there. And you could be as low as 75 or as much as 252. That's a big difference in numbers, but they just keep changing. And we're gonna, and having lived here for a really long time, we do these stair steps where we have a huge development and we jump up, and then no one builds because there's an overabundance of homes, and then until that fills in, and then you have the next one come. And so it's more of like a terraced garden, like is what it would probably look like over the last 50 years.
As we have rezone requests come to us and things, because quite honestly, when you read the comp plan we have right now, it says we have enough industrial for 11,000 jobs. Somebody could come to us with that as findings to say your comp plan justifies rezoning this industrial to residential. It's right here in your comp plan. So it's really important to us to have legitimate numbers, or otherwise they're going to say your comp plan was off the charts wrong when you put it together. And so this is our findings when we're hearing request,
Yeah.
rezone request or anything. So it's worth it to us to have these numbers as legit as we can
Yeah.
get them. And the obvious picture is right now that number is somewhere around 378 in the pipeline. If you take Logan's Landing, which was 272 units out of it, and you take Green Mountain, which actually the last rendition is 100 units out of it, that takes 372 units out of that number, and I think it gives it a more realistic number. Personally, the planning all the way through goes with this 697 units in the pipeline, and they're not. So that's why
And I agree. I mean, having gone to meetings in the past, like the piece of land by the airport, they've brought that, I don't know, 4, 5 more, I'm sure more times than that, bringing different ones in, and how do you plan for those things?
Well, we plan for them by zoning. When we bring something in, there's not going to be actual, numbers. We actually have, even though we have 85 LDR 8.5 zone with our PURD subdivision rules, you can get up to 30 units an acre in that zone. You have to do a whole bunch of special stuff, which is for the city, but you can do it. And we're not even counting any properties where we're applying that code at this point. We have ADUs are allowed in any lot over 8,500 square feet. We're not counting that in any of the stuff that we're doing, so we don't have, I've been trying to get these projections better for a while. We didn't have a meeting for the last couple months, but it's, as I've said, we're going to get down to the crunch time, and we're getting down to the crunch time. So.
And Dave is correct. There is a lot of additional work that could be looked at, and like when you look at the housing, there are even looks like there's inconsistencies, because in some cases I talk about total number in the pipeline, then there's likely to occur, and that's part of the reason why I said I had to take the amount of land left and I reversed engineered based upon are historical patterns, and Dave is fundamentally correct in arguing that's where my mistake is, because there's a lot of changes in the law, and every house that has a single family lot under state law 6 months after the comp plan is updated will be entitled to 2 ADUs, not 1 or not none.
That doesn't keep us from putting together a quality plan with quality numbers,
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Let's put together something that we can stand on in defense of some things down the road. I just even at 1.15%. Now, Clark County last year, I have some figures here. Clark County last year, their growth rate was 0.84 to 1%, and Cowlitz County last year was, well, from 10 to 20, they were 0.8% a year. So both Clark and Cowlitz County, less than 1% growth. We're looking at 1.15% growth. We can all get on our phones and download a population growth app and project that, and it comes out close to that 8,284 people, and close on the units, just not exact, but close. So even though that's not planning is looking at your demands and saying we need to do this. Reacting is saying, oh, we got this much pie, so everybody gets this big a piece. We're even reverse engineering. It really isn't planning, but even when we plan at 1.15, it comes out to pretty close to those numbers. Still, we have the units in the pipeline to count, and then the management of the land that's left to look at. All in all, I think it shows that we have lots of space without looking at the urban growth boundary. And I think that, honestly, if we build this right, will be some teeth to be able to tell Cowlitz County, we've planned for this already. We don't have to add our UGB. We have the ability to increase our population this much without adding to the UGB. And that should be a situation where we're telling the county what we want to do, not that the county telling us what we want to do. Not to having the county shove big subdivisions down our throats. Because if you ever get a chance to spend some time with a public works director and get this stuff in plain English, the bottom line is we don't have sewer capabilities in the places it would be where people are wanting to put big subdivisions. We don't have the sewer capabilities for there, and we ain't going to pay for them. The developer should pay for them.
Right.
And it's, $6 million for a lift station. Yeah. And, so the water's kind of the same thing. We have a water rights application that we send in every year, and it never gets approved to increase our water rights. So we are limited. But with the right math and using the code that we already have in hand, we can accommodate a lot of this stuff and have those findings for the future. So that's why I keep asking about these numbers and hoping to get them adjusted.
Are
So-
we still, from a couple of years ago at meetings for like the PERD and things like that, we were at the higher threshold of what the ratio we were looking at for high density and low density, rather than being on the lower end. And are we still at that higher part? And
So we are trending towards the lower end for probably the last, probably since the subdivisions in 2012.
Yeah.
They tended to be on the lower end.
yeah,
Since I've been here, the Loganberry townhomes were on the higher end, because that was kind of the first project I started working on and that was built. And it's some of those 1819 building permits. And then we've had large lot subdivisions because our code does not have a minimum density, like a minimum of 6 lots per acre. That is going to change because once we update our comp plan, we have 6 months to implement these RCWs, and you have guys like Max who are here saying, you should implement that so that I can move ahead. And yeah, so it is coming, and it's part of that list of 12 options that we have to implement 3 of. And it's the minimum 6 lots per acre, which basically means our 12,000 and our 8,000 square foot districts are going to have to go away, because it's going to have to go to multiple units on an 8,000 square foot lot and multiple ADUs on square foot lots. So subdivisions will have to build in. Some lots have ADUs upon subdivision, otherwise you won't be able to get to that 6 units per acre minimum. So that's all built into the RCWs, and we just haven't implemented those code changes, but we're going to have to, at which point Dave's point is, yeah, we'll have plenty of land once we adopt those changes.
Do we have any idea how many lots that we have that are over 8,500 square feet?
We don't, but we could probably run that out of the GIS system and figure that out for you. So, but we'd have to get Cowlitz County GIS data and run that for you.
Raspberry Park was zoned 8.5. They're allowed to have 20% smaller, of 20% of the lot smaller, just because of sorting and fitting. But so Raspberry Park's somewhere around 240. Takes 80% of 240. You know, that's a couple hundred just in Raspberry Park. And then the new one that's coming, they're zoned 8.5, right? There's a new one, 100 units, that's zoned 8.5.
So they actually got reduced lot size on average. They got some smaller lots in there, so
Some.
I don't remember what their size, but they had some lots. I want to say some lots are as small as 8,700. There's a couple really small ones in there, but I think those were multi-family that got as low as the 3,000, 3,500.
You know, Travis, I've sat in some meetings before, and I've been surprised that developers aren't excited about higher density. Like, all the jurisdictions want higher density. They all do, you know, but a lot of the developers are like, yeah, no, I don't want to build that. They want to build single family because it's more lucrative. And that's, in the end, the developer's going to build what's more lucrative, right? I mean, you can zone it whatever you want, but unless you know, if it's the only piece left, then maybe, then it has a minimum density, minimum density, then they'll have to build something. But, you know, developers want to build what's most lucrative, and single family, they always sell, right?
Yeah. And
But that's going, you know, if you go into a bunch of the new stuff in Richfield, it's 0 lot line type stuff, and you know, there's a lot of single family that has no yard space and, you know, no lot to speak of.
Right.
You know, so it's not like, you know, the affordability of that is just not there. You know.
Right, that doesn't serve the segments of the population you're trying to serve with multifamily. I get it.
You know, well, people are buying them. You know, developers making his money somehow. So,
unfortunately, it's Californians who are buying them. It's
Right,
not Woodlanders.
all right, let's keep going with this. So hopefully we.
Okay, so that was kind of the extent of the information that I kind of wanted to get out there on the table, because
Okay.
I knew you wanted to talk about it.
Look.
So if you want to start going through the plan and have specific sections you want to talk about.
Sure, let's bring up the plan and figure. I think it's 1-1. Page 20.
Page 20.
Yeah. Table 1. So this is the first place that we use the currently pending residential projects at 697 units. And, are we gonna be able to change that number?
Can?
Okay. I have the best breakdown I could get off the city website for everything pending except for Green Mountain Village and Logan's Landing. And it came out to 378. I could list off what I have.
So, and you probably counted not the 252 for the apartments, but the 85 for the Lewis River subdivision at the sand pit.
Yes,
Yep.
Lewis River subdivision at 85, 720 Sandalwood at 39, 625th Street at 23, Alder and Ash at 150, Riverwalk 1 and 2 is 48, 1776 North Gorg is 30, and 1039 Park Street is 3 lots.
And
So-
they are planning on building ADUs as well. So I know that they had talked between, instead of 3, potentially 6 or 9, depending on when they get their frontage improvements done. But they
Okay.
might be max,
Let's make that,
like max looking
let's
at,
make that 12 then.
okay?
So I'll add 9 to this.
And then I think technically 620 is 23 additional units, yes. Sorry, 24 total units because the existing home is preserved for the 620 Fifth Street.
Well, that didn't go through the hearing.
So they have redesigned to do without the variance, so they're gonna have smaller units,
Okay.
but they will meet setbacks.
And are they still doing the nested parking?
Nested parking, yep.
How does that work?
What is
unless you're in the
nested
same
parking?
family? Huh?
What's nested
So
parking?
somebody parks behind you.
Oh, tandem, okay. I know.
Which, then, if it's not your family member, like, what kind of problems is that gonna create?
Yeah, and so I've been having conversations with them, and my belief is they're gonna have to do designated parking spaces for each unit. So you might have the wife with one and the husband with one, and they're just gonna have to figure out who gets home first and who's gotta move their car when the other one goes to work, as opposed to just random parking behind strangers.
Yeah, because the apartments that are there currently, that were built in the 70s, people are parking at the school because there's not enough parking already.
Yeah.
So, like, this whole, like, I can't remember what, 1 point whatever for parking spaces, and I know that the state is trying to get rid of that as well, but it just doesn't work. Like, everywhere where they build apartments, the streets are filled with cars because there's not enough parking. You can't use the ratios for bigger cities that have transit systems for places that don't.
Yeah. And as I said, state law is actually going the opposite direction
Right.
on that. But yeah, you basically nailed it, Dave. That is everything that's on the list that I have on the list as well.
You have a list?
Well,
Because I emailed you and asked you for one
off the top of my head.
on the 12th.
Yeah.
So,
When I used to be in that office in the back, I had a map with Post-its on it. But yeah, no, I use the website as well.
okay, so while we're on this
Okay?
figure, we have more than 570 units residential capacity because we haven't taken any assumptions based on a lot of things.
Mhm.
But I'm kind of willing to let that slide. But to understand, we haven't taken assumptions Because when we look at vacant land by zone and the calculations there, you know, acreage is deducted by critical areas. Well, we can mitigate, we can buy credits in the land bank, you know, and have more space. And we can also, you know, apply the PERD to anything over 2 acres and apply more units. So we can do some things there. In fact, this, actually one of the suggestions from the consultant down here is to apply the PERD code to things, you know, to meet better needs within the UGB.
One of the options of the RCWs is to require PURDs and minimum densities. Yeah, and that's currently not in the code.
And our subdivision code actually talks about when there are critical areas, that it's recommended to use the PURD portion to handle everything. And everybody, if you get a chance, I'm sure you know how to get on and look up the city code. It's under chapter 16 subdivisions, our planned unit residential code, which really creates a lot of inclusion possibilities, low-income housing possibilities. A lot of things are already in our code that it feels like the state is pushing down our throat. There's a lot of the ability to just look through that and get a feel for it, because I have a feeling down the road those are going to be the projects that are going to be presented to us. And anyway, okay, back to this table, meat and potatoes.
Okay.
So on the industrial, undeveloped industrial down there, so on commercial, we show a 2022 jobs estimate, but we don't show one for industrial.
I don't know why they have a 2022. Because I think it was the best available economic development information they had available to them.
And they just had it for commercial?
Yes.
So they didn't have it for industrial?
Yes, and part of the problem that broke down when they were looking at the industrial land is because there are no utilities out there, and basically all that Thoney farmland, and at the time the Bozarth farm, it had no infrastructure and streets, that they were not confident about the estimates for that. So they just used some random numbers. Now the one thing I think they did have available to them is the Port of Woodland a couple years ago did a industrial land study for the 426 acres, and they used that as the best modeling data for the industrial land. So it probably doesn't have a date on it, because they looked at full build out, not necessarily in the time frame. Because if you followed Face of Woodland and the various issues that have been going on with the Port of Woodland, they were planning on building all that infrastructure in the next 5 to 10 years, not over the 20-year planning horizon.
So maybe something was lost in translation. So we show a 2022 jobs estimate for commercial land. In 2022, we estimate we have this many jobs in commercial.
Based on the commercial land supply?
No, based on jobs. So, and then it says undeveloped jobs capacity, which would be based on the available commercial supply. So somehow we managed to estimate that we have 4,569 jobs. Can't do that without my glasses.
469.
Yeah, 4,669. We're able to say we have that many jobs?
Existing jobs.
Okay, but we're not able to say it for industrial.
Oh yeah, good question. So I would need to take a look at the economic development chapter and see what it says. Because it does discuss our existing job base and our existing job numbers, and I will add it to this if I can track down that number.
Cool. So we are gonna need to update page 38 as well. Says when added to the 694 units currently pending.
Oh, yes, okay. In table 5 or, oh, down below table 5,
Below
page
table 5.
38.
Good night.
Thank you, all of you.
Hey, Donna.
And I'm disappointed Donna left because if there's one person in town who says I talk too much about housing, it's Donna. That's her biggest complaint. It's all I ever talk about.
So, I don't have, the other thing I had that I wanted to talk about, was we got that one consultant report and it talked about, PSH housing. You remember that? How we're gonna be required to provide
I think that's this one, the housing capacity memo.
you remember that? And I had to ask what it was, and it was permanently sheltered housing, or basically emergency housing and things to that effect.
Yes, so that is on the website, and the document you're talking about is what we're calling the housing capacity analysis. So,
Okay.
because it lays out those income bands and where our housing.
So my question there is, what table is that? Oh, that's on that SCG Alliance thing. It's
Yep.
As I read the description for that, I don't see where that's accommodated in any of our codes. Am I correct or not?
That is correct, because we have not updated our codes. Now, there is going to be a conversation about whether or not we need to do this because of the size of the community. Because there are a lot of stuff that does not apply to communities less than 10,000, which is another important reason why the number that we pick for our comprehensive plan is important, because if we do run the numbers and it says we're going to have 11,000 people, then theoretically a lot of those regulations are going to apply to us.
And is
Now,
that one of them?
I think that is one of them specifically. Now, I've also pointed out that the council was looking at the zone change for Woodland Shores RV Park, because the council and the planning commission had recommended year-round occupancy be permitted in some cases, and Woodland Shores applied to that. And one of the arguments that can be made, if the council wants to make it, and that is there are more than 52 units in Woodland Shores, and that those would constitute, if there was a catastrophe or a housing pressure, that those spaces could house, or we could seek, like FEMA accommodations and FEMA trailers that would allow us to install housing units in a RV style type development that would meet that standard. So even if we end up falling into that zone where we have to implement that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the city of Woodland needs to sponsor an emergency shelter or one of the
No.
churches need to build a shelter. We can achieve that through different methods, and that's part of the reason, part of my strategic planning, and that is by keeping under 10,000, it becomes, instead of a mandate, it becomes something that we need to pursue and solve in another way without having to start seeking people who are willing to build emergency shelters and that kind of stuff in town. Because good planning says we want that, but being told you have to do it is one way to get the council not to want to do it.
Well, nothing says we have to build it, we just have to accommodate it in a zone. It's like when you see adult-oriented businesses. By state law, we had to allow those in a zone someplace.
Yeah.
So, in the industrial, they went, you know, but, so the report that had all the PSH stuff really didn't apply to us? Or do we need it?
I don't want to say that because I don't want you to dump it out of comp plan if it's not required. But yes, it is discussed in the housing section because it is good planning for us to have that discussion.
Well, let's talk about the goals and policies for that then. We gotta be page.
Forty is where it starts at least. Goals and policies are on 42.
42, thank you.
4.5.
42? Yep, 4.5.
The only thing slower than this laptop is me.
Sorry, yeah,
There
I
we
don't
go.
know why I'm not
Recent
using the
housing
mouse. I
legislation.
specifically hooked it up.
Permanent supportive housing. So when you look at the definition of that, I did my best to go to the state's flyers and everything, and something wouldn't open up, but what is their definition of permanent supportive housing? So, because stuff we already have, is that considered permanent supportive housing? The stuff that the county,
Looks like some of this stuff we already have covered by the Woodland Action Center. Like the job training, those kind of things that are in the goals and policies.
yeah,
The first three would be 1.1 through 1.3 are already covered. But
requires jurisdictions to analyze housing capacity, yep, all that. So they, in our comp plan, they give a special column to permanent supportive housing. And do we consider the stuff that the Archdiocese does with the, what's that, Lilac Place? Is that permanent supportive housing?
That I don't know.
Or
for
is
sure.
it, you know, actual halfway houses and I just trying to find out if we're already covered on that or if we definitely don't have a definition that says permanent and this
33, right there, yeah.
So what I did is the comprehensive plan, or sorry, the housing memo, oh, sorry, that's the Word document, refers to permanent supported housing as defined by this RCW. And then when you look up that RCW, it has a specific subsidized leased housing with no limit on length of stay that prioritizes people who need comprehensive support services to retain tenancy and utilizes admissions practices designed to use lower barriers to entry that would be typical for other subsidized or unsubsidized rental housing, especially related to rental history, criminal history, and personal behaviors. So I think that we have the one by the Lilac Gardens, I think would fall into that. The Catholic Charities Project down Casa de la, I forget what it is. Lilac Place would also fall into that. And I believe, like on Lewis River Road, the Jefferson Apartments and is it the Windbreaker Apartments next to that? I think those would both fall into it. And then the project on Hillshire would fall into that. So mathematically, that might be like 80% of our multifamily might technically fall into that.
Well, we have the place by Safeway there,
Woodside Terrace.
Oh yeah.
but do they have these lower barriers?
I don't think so. I think that is market rental housing.
Woodside Terrace is not,
No,
unless that's changed.
You think it's changed?
Unless that's changed,
Oh.
that would be.
Yeah, that
should
one I
count.
don't know. To be honest, I completely forgot about that place.
How would we find out what their barriers are?
I could call them.
Because we might have that one covered.
Literally, I think I would have to call them.
Well, if you don't mind, if you could get anywhere, because we don't have the need for a bunch, but if we can say we already have that covered, it makes everything else easier.
Yeah. Although it won't mean that we still don't have to include it in the comp plan, even if we tell them we have a 20-year supply of permanent supportive housing, they're not going to care.
Well,
They're still going to want the goals and policies there.
sure,
Yeah.
shit, but
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It would be nice to have a section in here that talks about our current supply and whether it's adequate.
I kind of actually think we have that emergency thing covered too. You know,
Is there somebody you want me to call and check about that? Any of the churches?
on the emergency, well, you know, it identifies 0.23 acres, and then the way the emergency shelter is applied, you know, we could use the old fire station for that. We could, you know, it doesn't take much to say we have available emergency shelter if there was an emergency. So, and
Yeah.
we've pulled together for emergencies before.
And the RV park is what, that's the standard I was specifically thinking of for in an emergency.
Well, the high school's was used during the flood in '96.
Yep.
The council chamber's been open during cold weather, so, yeah.
Well, during COVID, the high school parking lot was used as a truck rest stop.
Yeah. And the commons area.
Yeah. Well, I would feel a lot better about it. We get those numbers adjusted. I think we have a lot more capacity as a whole here than we're identifying, but that's okay. We don't have to show that as long as we're planning for enough.
Yeah.
And took some convincing, but the 1.15 doesn't, to me, seem unreasonable. I know I seem like I probably way too serious about all this, but,
I think everybody wants
I
the
think
most
it's
accurate
important.
numbers to start from. I
Yeah.
think everybody
Like
wants
you-
that goal.
And like you said, like, if we don't define it, then developers can come in and define it in whatever way that they want, and it's hard to say, no, that's not what we intended if it's not defined.
Well, and to kind of bring it all around again, you weren't involved in a lot of these conversations in the beginning, and so you want me to justify why I did what I did.
Well,
So I need to argue, I need to make an argument why I did
yeah,
the way I did.
and, you know, I wouldn't have a problem going to city council and saying, guys, you know, we really need to plan this, you know, I understand what was trying to be done before, but it's really, we can just kind of use the math that is the math, and it all works, and
Well, and bear in mind that because I think of this as a process, I'm thinking a couple steps ahead. And once this is adopted, we've got to address the development regulations. And the development regulations are going to require us to do certain stuff. And then we're going to get that garbage can lid with a bunch of property housing allotment handed to us by Cowlitz County after we're done. Which means you're gonna have to wrestle with that as well, because do we update the comprehensive plan, or do we simply say, let's rerun the numbers with the development regulations, find out, do we need that? Because in the end, you're going to be making recommendations, do not annex more land, because we don't want to incur all these water and sewer improvements that we don't need, because we can accommodate it with guys like Max who are adding additional ADUs, and we're gonna get there without it, which fully implements the
Oh,
GMA.
and we can do a lot more of getting there without it if we change some of the stuff here to where we get rid of the acreage deduction by critical areas, because that's not true for every piece of property.
Yes.
And then if we applied the PURD to all of the residential zones, and, you know, so we have a possibility of suddenly 1,500 units over the, you know, so don't shove an annexation down our throats, because we have these possibilities.
Yes.
We could do that math and put that in here and have that many more bullets for keeping the UGB the size it needs to be.
Because inevitably, as you go through that exercises, you will realize the implications of the decisions and the code changes. And the council is going to have pressure to annex 100 acres for 1,000 homes. But at the same time, they have to recognize that there's a lot of people in Woodland who don't want to add 100 acres and 1,000 homes, because Woodland's not Woodland, it would be Ridgefield.
So
Yeah.
I doubt anybody is gonna spend the money to get water and sewer out there to annex 100 acres to build 1,000 homes. Because there's so much infrastructure that would need to be put in, and we ain't putting it in. We don't have the money for parks. You know, we ain't putting it in.
Yeah, and
So-
frankly, that's why when the Port of Woodland was talking about doing all that infrastructure improvement, it included a lot of the water and sewer capacities that would have done that. And as much as people blame me for being pro-development, I couldn't endorse that, because the implications is you're gonna get the entire bottoms full of residences the minute the port installs all of that capacity. And that's why I was like, yeah, okay, it implements our 20-year comprehensive plan.
So
but
much
it
of that's
totally
still
blows
Ag
me.
38 and stuff. There's a lot of things that has to happen before that just gets turned into subdivisions. And a big industrial development could build their own wastewater plant and drill a well and get their own water rights and do all that stuff. So it's really a lot of what if scenarios that, you know, right now, that's not attractive to anybody to buy us the infrastructure to do that out there.
Well, and developing the farmland down there goes against Cowlitz County's own agricultural and wetlands and critical areas, because the majority of the farmland that's left in Cowlitz County is the woodland bottoms. And so they have their own policy that it says that they're supposed, if anybody's farmer is trying to sell their land, that they are supposed to be helping the farmers find other farmers to buy and farm the land, not to subdivide it.
Yes.
That's their own policy.
And also I learned that when Cowlitz County, if the city did annex in acreage, Cowlitz County still wants the missing taxes for 5 years. The tax base that they lost, which, you know, depending on the piece of property, may not be all that much, but it is. There was, Riley just shared that bit of information with me. So a lot of that's difficult. I think continuing to work within our lines is good.
And if you look at your tax bills, you'll see you're all already paying Cowlitz County taxes. As a matter of fact, chances are good that you're paying Cowlitz County more taxes than you're paying to the city of Woodland.
Well, I don't understand when I send that property taxes off how it's divided up, because it just shows tax and then it shows and the, you know, the levies and things.
So this is a rabbit hole, but I can tell you exactly where the money goes. And I can
Let's
show
see
you-
it. Let's see it.
They
Print it.
take what every entity, what their pot is, and they divide it out by the value of everybody's home. So that's why they can't say, this is what yours is going to be and this is what yours is going to be, because it depends on every single property and what their rates are. So they don't have a certain percentage, because let's say the schools need 3 million, and then that's not the correct number, but then they have to divvy that out in their equitable formula so that the 3 million is raised no matter what percentage of that is your, like, it doesn't matter. They look at what the end is of what has been passed for how much they're supposed to get, and then it's divvied out by there. If your home is worth this much, you're this percentage.
Sure.
If your home, that's, so,
But-
yeah. I mean,
You
that's
got a
my-
good one?
that's
Have
my
you got one
version
that
of it.
pays some taxes, or you want a lot number?
Yeah,
You got-
I'm just pulling up the GIS mapping system, and then I'll.
Don't use the city of Woodland. Aren't they exempt from some taxes?
Yeah, I'm just opening the GIS system.
Okay. I could have gave you a lot
You
number.
want to volunteer 1 year?
I don't know the good ones off my head. Well, you could go.
Max, do you mind?
Yeah, I don't mind.
What's your address?
203 to Gala Court.
Where's the Gallup Court?
That's
Oh, okay,
Raspberry Pine.
okay.
So I don't know why it's not coming up. Let's see if I
Take
can-
out the 203. And then it'll just give you a list of addresses on that road, and you can pick one.
There you go. Good call. Okay, so this will get me in the
it
number.
was down there. Yeah, it was just different.
Okay, so this is you, Max, right? Yeah. Okay, so when you go into the GIS and you look here, why is it not opening?
Yeah, hit that right arrow.
Oh.
Hit the arrow, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not opening anything up for me. I don't have my glasses on here. Am I missing something?
you have a pop-up blocker locked? Cause it usually brings it up as,
That I don't know. Well, that's,
You search by the parcel
okay,
number?
actually, so what I will do is,
There you go, go to that,
what's that?
tax bill.
Yeah, so, okay, so, you're right, I should have just done a different address. Here. So if you get to the GIS page for your project or for your house, scroll down to the bottom here. It includes your taxes, information, and recorded documents. But specifically, we are going to look at the assessments, and we'll look at the 2025 assessment. And this is essentially your tax bill for the property. So it tells you first half is 2415, second half is 2415 for a total tax bill of 4800. And as you slide down, it tells you your 2024 rates versus your 2025 rates. So in this case, let's go down here, like your CDID is the Dyke District. So Max is paying them, he paid them $475 in 2024, and in 2025 he's paying them $518. Clark County EMS, Clark County Fire Rescue, schools, regional library, cemetery
What's-
district.
General expense, current expense, what's that one?
So City of Woodland is this number right here, $270 and $300.
Yeah.
The county taxes is 300, that's their current expense. And because this is a Clark, or county.
So that's the
document,
county current
Yep.
expense?
County current expenses. And when you actually look at a county property, it'll say current expense, but it won't have City of Woodland, but it'll have county road and county whatever. It'll be a different list.
Can't believe the Clark Callis Fire's getting more than the city now.
So bear in mind that we used to have our own fire department, we contracted with them.
I remember the whole thing.
And we used to pay them a ton of money. And what the council said is, if you join the fire district and you buy into the levies, we will drop our taxes by whatever you pay them. So instead of the pass-through, so if they got 300 from us, now they're getting it directly from the citizen, but the city's getting $300 less. So that city number, that's parks.
Even when they raise their
Yep.
charges, the city's money goes down?
No. We bowed out, gave them everything we used to give them. Now, if the citizens want to pay them more, it's between the citizens and them. The city
But
does not absorb.
What happens
that
if the
cost.
city of Woodland votes no, but everybody else in the district votes yes? See, they gave that
That's,
small town feel away.
that's part of the reason why they did it.
All right.
Is
Right.
the
Well-
council said, hey,
For the library levy,
Yeah.
Woodland voted no, and, but
yeah, so instead of
but every-
tying us to your anchor, you're gonna tie yourselves to the anchor and hope
Alright,
that the
alright.
sea rise doesn't kill you. But yeah, that's the cold hard number. That $300 and something, that's our police department, our fire, our parks department, our city hall, our planning department, and our public works department. That's why they rely on utilities and water improvements and utility taxes, and it's because the bone is pretty bare when it comes to city property tax revenue.
All right. Max, think you're getting your money's worth?
Well, y'all see that jump there from 24 to 25?
Oh, I saw
that's
that jump.
because you didn't have the school levy in there.
But even
that other
take-
year.
Even taking the school out of the picture.
No, the fire department like didn't bill for a year, and then so they added a year, so we got double whammy.
Yeah, that too. Well, it wasn't, the fire department didn't bill them, the auditors, or the assessor's office forgot to put it in.
Not fair, not fair. Okay, so we had that, we went down that rabbit hole.
Now, I will also point out that it includes your levy rate, which is your tax rate right here. So the school taxes is what massively increased that bill.
Yeah.
Whereas the city had your non-voted taxes was very stable. And then the levies down here, the special assessments, it'll go up and down based upon what's voted on by the residents. So you can actually track your progress from bill to bill to bill, whether your tax rate is going up or down, based upon whether your tax bill is going up or down.
Are we going further down
No, well, good.
no, are we going further down
Is there something you would like to
Oh,
discuss, or you?
I had a couple things, so I was.
Sure.
I was just, if you had more, I was waiting until we got.
No,
to the
no, and that's great. I might need to open that back up for you, but
That's okay. I have it pulled up on mine too. I think there's a typo on page 67 on T8.
Transportation goal 8.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be achieve 0 roadway fatalities
Oh, yes.
and not facilities and serious injuries.
Yes. Spell check won't catch that.
Oh, great. Now I have to worry about Whitney and Sharon every time I write something.
Yeah.
No, I just,
So-
that part was just like, I had to,
I'm kidding,
I had
I'm
to read
kidding,
it a couple
I'm
times, I'm
kidding.
like, that doesn't make sense.
I haven't come across it in my notes, but I think it shows the stern wheeler running for over 100 years in the river too. I'd have to go back. There's a misprint there that it ran till 1991 or something.
And do you remember what chapter that's in?
It's in the first, in like our history. I
Okay.
Yeah.
have it written down somewhere, but
This is kind of goes along with the tax part, and I don't know that that's part of this, and so we can discuss it later if you want, but is there a plan that the fire department has given to us of what they're gonna do since Ridgefield passed that port tax? And so they're not gonna get as much money from the fire service as they're supposed to? And for those of us who are not in that, like, how they figured out that we're not gonna get stuck paying for Ridgefield?
They have not, I know they are working on that because they're trying to figure out how to normalize that so that everybody else isn't paying for that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what their plan is, but we did have a conversation with them that we need to talk to them about our fire impact fee and when to adjust that fire impact fee. Because at some point, our current impact fee is paying off the new fire station. That will be done, and so the taxpayers will not have to pay for that. It'll be part of their burden, and we collect the fire impact fees for them, and what that rate is going to be based upon, they need to justify to us what expenses are coming to Woodland, and new development will pay for their fair share of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, my other part was, in the climate section, towards the end, where we're doing that program that we took part in.
Yep, the pilot program.
This is more of like just a historical thing, but it talked about there's only, the last major flood was in 48, but there was one 64 as well, and some smaller ones in the 70s.
Okay, do you remember what page that is?
I can find it. While you were
The flooding, I thought I read that they talked about the 96 floods and stuff. I thought
There
they,
hadn't been a major flood since between 48 and 96, but there was actually a pretty big one in
gotcha.
64 as well.
I drove sandbag truck in '96. That was interesting.
Yeah, I was up from Thursday to Monday.
I'll
at
bet
the
you
fire
were.
department. It was in where we were talking about the climate resilience. That's the name of it.
at the end, I think.
It was crazy because on this side of the dike, it was 80 degrees and calm, peaceful. The geese are grazing, and on the other side of the dike, it was like a mud flow, full-size pine trees going end over end in the water. It was just
Crazy.
total war on the other side. Well, you're looking for that. If I can jump in there, page 25, it says that the Sternwheeler sailed from 1883 to 1991.
The same captain.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm assuming that's probably 1891?
I don't know.
I didn't catch that.
Because engineers will tell you you're only as good as your worst number. Especially the Hubble engineers.
I will have to call Erin Thoney on that one, because I'm sure she'll know that number off the top of her head.
And then my only other thing that I'm looking for it, didn't really make sense to me. So they talked about like wanting to like build like condense everything to get more units in and things like that. At the same time, they literally said that they needed to support parks and urban agriculture. Meanwhile, while we don't have enough land to expand, and they want small buildings and no yards, you know, and like you can't have a urban farm when you don't have a yard.
So I have
So-
heard there's an urban legend around town that Darlene Johnson planted fruit trees as her street trees just to thumb her nose at the city, because we deserve it, because it'll create a mess and be nasty and smell terrible when the fruit drops. But I haven't been able to confirm that, and I've never asked Darlene, so. But that's the kind of, I think, planning movement that they have in mind, and that is idea that there's empty lots that could be used for urban gardens, and we could plant flowering trees or fruit-bearing trees in the right-of-way as a way to grow local.
Isn't there something about that also in like unused industrial lots too, or something? Some sort of
Yeah,
ongoing.
farming's still
Yeah.
allowed in unused industrial lots,
Well, agriculture's allowed everywhere, right? I mean,
but in our code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I just had a quick question. I mean, ADUs count as units in terms of comp plan, right? But you don't count it as density, right?
Against what?
You don't count it towards density, do you? Because it's not a
Um,
primary residence? I'm just curious how,
Yeah, so in my opinion, they should be counted towards
right,
density.
but,
Because we have impact fees, school impact fees, park impact fees, they are reduced.
Right.
But but that's simply a result of the fact that less people live in them, so you have smaller kid counts, because that statistical analysis I happen to believe in.
So it's situational whether it counts as density in my day life. I'm just wondering if it was the same.
And in my opinion, it should clearly be counted.
If it's a residence and it supports, I'm just curious whether you counted it or not.
Aging in place, that's the whole basis of it, is seniors would be able to get a small place and stay on their property and rent their old house.
I mean, the House bill's gonna make it so that it doesn't matter if it exceeds density or not, you still have to allow it. Or does it make it that you have to reduce density on other lots? I mean, I'm just curious how that's gonna fit, I don't know. It depends on whether you count it as density or not, right? So, I'm just
And
curious.
to me, that's a policy issue. Because I would think if there are council members who want to preserve the character of the community, then you should include ADUs in that calculation.
The authors of the House bill almost, the tone of it is almost that they don't count it as density, right? Would you agree with that? I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, if you're counting ADUs, then we have unlimited number of unit capacities.
Potential, the
I mean,
capacity.
if 50% of our town is 8,500 square foot or more, then you can put 2 on there.
Right.
Then, we're good till 3,000 maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not against ADUs at all, Max.
No, I'm just
I'm
saying,
down with
it
ADUs.
meets
I'm
their
just curious
criteria,
how it
like-
fits in everything.
Well, in our ADU standards specifically say it has to look like the house, you can only have one door that faces the street, the neighbors need to at least be able to reasonably not notice that you've got 2 or 3 units on that lot, because if it looks like a house, what's the problem?
When I used to manage West Coast Training out here, and we had a housing list for the students that came in from all over the world, really, and they would rent. There's rooms over garages, complete ADUs over garages that you didn't even know existed until somebody comes and says, "Hey, I want you to." You had to be that we had to inspect them before we would put them on the list. I want to be on your list for your housing list. It was actually quite a economic thing here in Woodland, because we had 50 students at a time there, and they would stay in different places in the area,
And it drives me crazy because Airbnb has ruined that.
Probably has taken up a bunch of those, yeah. But the owner, the guy that we sold the school to, bought some houses and had plenty of housing, but it cut into that a little bit for people, but I was just surprised that where there was ADUs, and in the old farming theme of things, that's how things were, a bunch, so.
So it's on page 161. Or if you type in the top, it's 162, but. And it says, while flooding was not a major issue in Woodland from the 1950s to the mid-1990s.
Okay.
So Travis, are you going to make some changes, update some numbers, and then send it out, and then the plan is next month or next planning commission meeting that we'll actually vote on it? Is that the plan, or?
Well, and so.
I'm just curious, I'm not
Yeah,
rushing
so
or
your-
slowing or anything.
Your recommendation, part of it is the more I make changes to this now that kind of the final draft is there, it's just everybody's gonna continue to get more and more confused because I need to print new versions of it every time somebody asks for it. And so part of me thinks that maybe for the next meeting, I just need to bite the bullet and write a staff report that says, I recommend that you recommend approval of this with the following changes. Page 25, add this language.
Oh, okay.
Or allow me to make this correction before it goes to the council. That way the council can see, if they're reading it this weekend, they'll be able to see what you recommended changes to the version that's kind of, we're done.
So like some of the typos and that type of thing, those aren't substantive ones, but the changing of the numbers, that may need to be looked at. People may need to be able to see that again in a circle of public notice or so, I don't know.
Maybe print
You
some,
know what I mean?
maybe print some backup too, you know.
And
That's,
as part of that staff report, I'll give you a list that says, in addition to the stuff that Dave identified, there's a 3 here and a 4 there. Therefore, I'm gonna change this number from 679 to 683.
Right.
And in this chapter, it'll mean that the analysis will go adjusted, but it may not be a substantive change, but yeah. And typically, the adoption language says, and the clerk's office is authorized to make pen and ink changes, so that if somebody comes in 2 months from now and says, hey, you know, there's a spelling error on this page, we'll just correct that error and PDF it, put it on the website again,
so you're saying that you would prefer that we made a recommendation to the council at the next meeting? Okay, I just wondered what.
Well, what if we get a room full of people that say, we need to make a bunch of changes?
Well, you can make a motion that includes there's additional changes that the council needs to consider, because eventually the council at their next meeting is gonna have a hearing as well, and they'll wanna know what your recommendation is based upon the people who showed up and their opinion. Do you still recommend approval, or do you think we need to take an extra month and do 3 more meetings, in which case I might ask you to come in on a Wednesday 3 weeks in a row, so that you can make a recommendation at the October meeting for November adoption and December applicability.
Well, if somebody comes up with, thought-shifting stuff, we have the right to say, to hold off on that recommendation.
Yeah.
Right, we can vote whatever, we can direct you as to what, right?
Yeah. And theoretically, you can say, I recommend approval for everything except for the environmental
Right,
chapter.
right.
And that needs to be totally rewritten.
I just know that, we're behind right now, right? And so we're trying to catch up, kinda, so. I'm fine, I'm fine with moving forward swiftly with, without being rash.
You don't think
Without
you
being
can go
rash.
ahead and,
And to be honest, what is the Department of Commerce gonna do if we don't get adopted by the end of the year? We're just gonna say, well, I'll incorporate more Cowlitz County conversation.
Will
But
they
to
hold
me,
funding back
that's a
for
step
stuff like that?
backwards. What?
Will they hold state funding back for stuff like that, or?
I don't
that-
know.
That's where I don't want.
have they paid us everything already?
Well, but that's part of the reason why I've been arguing and sending these emails for the last 3 years of saying, yeah, this is a bad position you put us in. So our argument is gonna be, we still deserve our money because you screwed us by pushing us over the cliff in 2025
I-
instead of waiting for 2026.
Right.
But at the same time, there's my philosophy of, well, if we just get it adopted with the snapshot that we have, let's adopt the code changes, and then have a conversation next year when we're not under the gun and nobody's looking at us. The eye of Sauron is no longer on us.
Well, and
Let's
changes
make
can be
it-
made to the comp plan even if it's finalized.
Yeah, we can make a change every year.
Okay.
One per
Okay.
calendar year.
That makes me feel less.
It's funny, we can
Emergency.
change it once a year, but we can't get these numbers changed. How many just out of curiosity, so aside from the planning commission, how many people are actively talking about the comp plan and the numbers?
So, I've probably had conversations about the comprehensive plan with 10 people in the last month. So, that's not huge, but considering how many people come out to planning commissions.
Yeah, but how many of those are council members?
Um,
Are there council members that are gonna even notice the changes?
There are a couple who've had conversations with me, and there are people that I'm talking to that are having conversations with the council member. Because like, for example, Scott Perry, who's across the street, I know he's reading the comprehensive plan because he asked for a new zoning map, and I brought it over to him, and he had it up on his computer and was like, well, asking me questions about it. So there are people reading it, but like I said, I've been talking about this since 2023. I've probably had more conversations with Donna about the comprehensive plan than anybody in the entire city.
Okay, well, anybody else want to talk anything else about comp plan tonight? It's getting close to some of our bedtime.
I move that we adjourn.
Oh, I got one more thing.
All right, I thought you were setting me up for that.
I have a piece of new business, just so everyone's aware. RCW 35.63.040 is commissions, organizations, meetings, and rules, and this is what it says. The commission shall elect its own chair and create and fill such other offices as it may determine it requires. The commission shall hold at least one regular meeting in each month for not less than 9 months in each year. It shall adopt rules for transaction of business and shall keep written records of its meetings, resolutions, transactions, findings, and determinations, which record shall be a public record. Now, I say that because I want everybody, thank you too for volunteering and joining us, and look forward to a long deal. But this year, we can't cancel any more meetings. We canceled January, April, and May. So, we need everybody.
All right, on
That
that note, I move to adjourn.
All right. Anybody got a second?
Second.
All right, how do I turn this thing off? We just muted?
Yep.
We don't end?
That's all she showed.
Do I end, Bretta? Do I hit end on this? I can do it. You don't have to.
Thanks for staying awake.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Unplug this right here? Yep. Thanks for all your work and examination, Dave. You too, Whitney. Whitney, glad to have you aboard. I didn't crunch. I never crunch the numbers like you do. I don't think I have the ability to. 'Cause I don't know.
I've been whipping a dead horse for 4 months. It might be weird of me to, because even so, when I wasn't on the planning commission, I dosed myself. I didn't do anything, but at the same token, I still kept an eye on what projects are coming in and what applications, to the best of ability. So I kind of had a feeling for my hand for some of this, and I'm like,
Clifford, nice to meet you.
yes,
Have a good one.
Clifford,
I hope
nice
you
to
come
meet
back.
you.
Let's do it again next month.
That timing makes sense. As far as.
Well, I think you're kind of on.
Yes, so you'll probably watch next stuff or whatever time.
That's what this group will start
Brother,
working
do I hang on to
on in
these?
December.
Property. They usually keep
So
They leave
they'll
these here?
start the conversation about what needs
Okay.
to be fixed in December.
If you're not here for
Yeah,
some
and
reason.
that's, did you get a copy of the
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
staff report?
I did not.
I did such a bang up job earlier.
Because that's actually the analysis of.
All right, have a good evening,
all of the
everybody.
Stuff that needs to
Good
be
night.
fixed.
I think very few people talk about comprehensive plan. I think a lot of people talk about the developments when they get released. I wonder how, like, where they came from and how it got passed.
You know, and it's, you're absolutely right. It's all of this stuff that we do that nobody knows.
I know, put their name on it, right?
Consultant.
Yeah.
A lot of that. And-
Well, and that's exactly his point, where the numbers from consultant come from.
Gotcha.